The thing that we're grieving, there is going to be anger attached to it. That's so normal. It's important to understand the difference inside of you on whether what you're experiencing is anger or your grief. How do I know when I'm just feeling anger or when I'm feeling grief? There is an anger component to grief, right? There is angry at the life that we have been thrusted into. There's anger for the person that we have lost, the situation that we have lost, the thing that we're grieving. There is going to be anger attached to it. That's so normal. It's important to understand the difference inside of you on whether what you're experiencing is anger or your grief. So there's the anger attached to the grief, but then there's just the anger of like everyday fucking life. So, for example, for me, there was so much like despair and hopelessness in the future that I lost with Ariana. The only thing that I really wanted in life was to grow old with her. And I didn't get that. We got everything else, but I didn't get to grow old with her. And there was the hopelessness with that. The future became non existent. Not that I couldn't imagine a future, it just wasn't there. It was black, it was a void. There's nothing to color it in. There was no outlines that I could see. There was no figures. There was no shadow. There was nothing, just void. The anger with that was more of this like grieving, where I'm grieving now that this future is gone. I'm grieving that this person isn't here. I'm grieving that I have to raise the kids alone. I'm grieving that I have to do life alone when I had somebody for 18 years to do life with. But there is a difference between that versus just using grief as an excuse to be angry. Say I have a really shitty day and the kids are asking me for a lot. They're overwhelming me. I feel all of that just bubbling up and I can't fucking handle it. And the reaction to that is to start yelling at Ariana. Why the fuck did you leave me? I don't want to do this shit alone. If you were here, this wouldn't be happening. I'm now using the fact that I have this grief that always exists within me as an excuse to not deal with the present moment. And instead of taking stock in what is happening, because those days happened with Ariana and without her. There were days that the kids were driving me nuts. I had a bad day at work and I was just overwhelmed. And like we all have that. That's part of the human experience. But when we take the human experience and we use grief and we say, this is because of my grief, we are using our grief as an excuse. We have to know whether we are using that as an excuse. We are using anger for our grief instead of just confronting what's coming up in us and knowing and trusting that like we need to just deal with our shit in that moment. And it potentially has nothing to do with our grief. It takes a lot of effort and it takes skill to be able to begin to recognize within yourself the difference between anger and grief, because there is a difference. So pay attention next time you feel all of that bubbling up, because in your grief, it's going to be that that longing, that sadness, that hopelessness, that just frustration. It's that part of you, you can feel it. It's different. It's almost grounded in you in a weird sort of way. And I know we usually use that word groundedness to mean this positive experience, but I think there is a groundedness in our grief where we can feel it. It's rooted in us. And we can know, no, I'm just experiencing grief right now and I just need to be with it and to feel it. But when we want to push those emotions away and we want to be angry at them and we want to be angry at people and we want to be angry at our situation, that's not our grief. That's just the human experience. So pay attention and notice, is it anger or is it grief? That way you can circumvent your grief and grow your capacity to hold it and not use that as an excuse from healing outside of your grief.